In this episode, we're going to treat one-on-ones as a strategic security leadership tool rather than as a casual check-in that happens when someone remembers to schedule it. For brand new learners, it can be surprising to hear that a private conversation can be one of the highest leverage ways to improve security outcomes, but it makes sense once you remember that strategy is executed by people. One-on-ones are where trust is built, where misunderstandings are corrected early, and where obstacles that never appear in group meetings finally get named. If you run these conversations with structure and care, you create a rhythm where team members feel safe telling you what is really happening, which means you can fix problems before they become incidents or missed deadlines. You also create a pathway for growth, because people learn best when they get timely guidance, clarity on expectations, and support that matches their level of experience. The goal today is to show you how to run one-on-ones in a way that strengthens performance and accountability without turning the conversation into a scripted interrogation. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is a companion to our course companion books. The first book is about the exam and provides detailed information on how to pass it best. The second book is a Kindle-only ebook that contains 1,000 flashcards that can be used on your mobile device or Kindle. Check them both out at cyber.author.me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. A strong one-on-one begins with a clear mental purpose that you carry into every meeting, because without a purpose, these conversations drift into small talk or status reporting that could have happened elsewhere. The purpose is to build trust, remove friction from real work, and develop the person into a stronger contributor and, over time, a stronger leader. Trust comes first because without trust, people hide problems, and hidden problems are where risk grows quietly. Removing friction is next because unblocked work is the fastest way to improve outcomes, and most blocks are social or organizational, not technical. Development is third because teams that grow capability become less dependent on a few heroes, which makes the organization more resilient. These three purposes fit security strategy well because security work involves cross-team coordination, continuous judgment, and decisions under uncertainty. When a person can speak honestly about what they are seeing and what they need, you gain visibility that no dashboard can provide. That visibility lets you lead with real evidence instead of assumptions. To build trust, the most important ingredient is consistency, because trust is created through repeated experiences that feel safe and reliable. If one-on-ones happen sporadically, they feel optional, and optional conversations do not produce candid truth. Consistency also signals that you value the person and their work enough to protect time for it, which reduces the fear that they only matter when something is wrong. Trust also grows when the tone is steady, meaning you do not swing between intense pressure and casual friendliness depending on the week. A person who experiences steady tone learns that they can bring both good news and bad news without being punished. In security, this is critical because bad news often involves risk, mistakes, or confusion, and if people fear blame, they will delay sharing information until it is too late. A well-run one-on-one creates a predictable space where early truth is rewarded, and early truth is what prevents small issues from becoming high-impact problems. One of the fastest ways to deepen trust is to make the conversation more about thinking than about reporting, because reporting can feel like surveillance while thinking feels like support. Reporting is simply recounting what happened, but thinking is exploring why something is happening and what choices exist next. If you ask only for updates, the other person learns to bring polished status and hide messy reality. If you ask how they are deciding, what trade-offs they see, and what they are uncertain about, you invite honesty and learning. This matters in strategic security because the work often involves ambiguous decisions, like how to balance speed and risk, or how to present impact to stakeholders. When you help a person reflect on decisions rather than defend outcomes, you build competence and reduce fear. You also learn what mental models they are using, which helps you coach more effectively. Over time, a thinking-focused one-on-one builds a culture where people admit uncertainty early, ask better questions, and make more defensible choices. Unblocking work starts with the recognition that obstacles are often hidden because people assume they should solve them alone. Many beginners, especially those new to a team, feel that asking for help is a sign of weakness, so they struggle quietly while time slips away. A strategic one-on-one is where you normalize the idea that obstacles are data, not shame. When you ask what is slowing you down, what decision you are waiting on, and what dependency is unclear, you surface the real reasons work stalls. Some blocks are resource blocks, like time or staffing, but many are clarity blocks, like unclear ownership, conflicting priorities, or uncertain expectations from stakeholders. In security, clarity blocks are common because multiple teams share responsibility and decision rights can be fuzzy. When you identify a clarity block, you can often unblock quickly by defining who decides, what criteria matter, and what the next step should be. This saves time and reduces stress, which improves both performance and morale. A practical way to unblock is to help the person separate what they control from what they do not, because confusion about control creates paralysis. If someone is waiting on another team, they may feel stuck, but they can still clarify requirements, prepare options, or draft a decision summary that makes approval easier. If someone is uncertain about priorities, they can still map work to business objectives and identify which tasks reduce risk most. In a one-on-one, you can guide this by asking what is the smallest action you can take today that moves this forward, even if the dependency remains. That question shifts the focus from frustration to progress. You can also help the person recognize when the real block is not the task, but the decision environment, such as a stakeholder who keeps changing expectations or a leader who has not defined risk appetite clearly. In those cases, unblocking may require escalation or stakeholder alignment, and the one-on-one is where you plan that move deliberately. The result is that work stops drifting and starts moving again. One-on-ones also build trust by giving space for concerns that people do not want to share publicly, especially concerns about conflict, uncertainty, or fear of failure. In group meetings, people often protect their reputation, so they avoid admitting confusion or pushing back on unrealistic requests. In a private conversation, they can be more honest, but only if they believe honesty will not be used against them. This is where your behavior matters, because if you respond to concerns with impatience or with quick dismissal, trust erodes fast. A better approach is to treat concerns as signals about the health of the work system, not as annoyances. If someone says they are worried about a decision path or a stakeholder reaction, you can ask what evidence supports that worry and what outcomes they fear. This turns anxiety into analysis and creates a path to action. In strategic security, this is essential because fear often comes from real risks, like unclear obligations or fragile dependencies. When you take concerns seriously and help convert them into actionable clarity, you earn trust and improve outcomes. Growing leaders through one-on-ones means you treat each conversation as a chance to build judgment, not just to fix immediate problems. Judgment is the ability to choose well under constraints, explain the choice, and learn from the results. In security strategy, judgment shows up in how someone ranks risks, frames business impact, handles trade-offs, and manages stakeholder expectations. A one-on-one is where you can ask the person to walk you through their reasoning, then gently challenge assumptions and expand their perspective. For example, if they propose a solution that is technically strong but operationally disruptive, you can ask how it affects business goals like speed and reliability. If they focus on a dramatic threat but ignore a more probable scenario, you can ask what evidence supports their ranking. This is not about criticizing. It is about teaching strategic thinking habits. Over time, these habits become automatic, and the person begins to lead from clarity rather than from impulse. That is how leaders are grown, one reasoning conversation at a time. Another important leadership growth element is helping people develop ownership without creating fear, because ownership is the foundation of accountability. Ownership means a person feels responsible for moving something forward, but healthy ownership also includes knowing when to escalate and how to ask for support. In a one-on-one, you can clarify what the person owns, what success looks like, and what boundaries exist, so they do not take on unrealistic burdens. You can also help them define what done means in terms of outcomes, not just activity, because security work can otherwise become endless. If someone is tasked with improving a guardrail, for example, done might include not only writing guidance, but ensuring stakeholders understand it and that exceptions are handled consistently. When ownership is clear, accountability becomes less emotional because it is tied to an agreed goal. The one-on-one is also where you check whether ownership matches authority, because assigning ownership without decision rights is a common way organizations create frustration. When you align ownership with authority and support, you grow leaders who can deliver reliably and who can handle responsibility without burning out. One-on-ones can also strengthen the team's strategic alignment by ensuring each person understands how their work connects to business objectives and the current priority set. In many teams, misalignment happens quietly when people interpret priorities differently or when they pursue tasks that feel urgent but do not reduce meaningful risk. A one-on-one is where you can reconnect the person's work to the risk ranking and the business-first triage logic the team is using. This is especially useful when the person is dealing with conflicting stakeholder requests, because you can help them decide what to say yes to and what to defer. By revisiting objectives and value drivers, you reinforce the idea that security exists to protect outcomes like trust and reliability, not to win arguments. This kind of alignment conversation also helps the person communicate better with stakeholders because they can explain their decisions using business language. Over time, this reduces the need for constant manager intervention because team members can self-correct and self-prioritize. That is a leadership growth milestone, and one-on-ones are where it is developed and reinforced. Another high-leverage use of one-on-ones is to build early warning systems for risk, because many indicators of future problems appear first as small signals in people's experiences. A person might mention that a stakeholder keeps changing scope, which can signal governance weakness that will later create audit or delivery problems. Someone might mention that a critical dependency is fragile, which can signal resilience risk. Someone might mention that exceptions are being granted casually, which can signal that guardrails are being bypassed and exposure is growing. These signals often never appear in formal reports until after damage is done, because formal reports tend to capture what is already visible and accepted. One-on-ones capture what is emerging, uncertain, and uncomfortable, which is exactly where strategic leaders need visibility. Your job is to listen for patterns and to connect them to objectives and threats, then decide what action is needed. Sometimes action is immediate escalation, and sometimes it is simply tracking the signal and asking for more evidence next time. Either way, you are using one-on-ones to reduce surprise, and reducing surprise is a major strategic advantage. Trust is also built when one-on-ones include recognition that is specific and grounded, because people learn what to repeat when you name what worked and why it mattered. Generic praise feels nice, but it does not shape behavior. Specific recognition, like you translated risk into business impact clearly, and that helped the decision move faster, teaches the person what excellence looks like in strategic work. It also reinforces team values like clarity, defensibility, and stakeholder empathy. Recognition should also be balanced with growth feedback that is equally specific, such as your recommendation was strong, but it needed clearer options and trade-offs to be actionable for leadership. This balance prevents the one-on-one from becoming either a cheerleading session or a fault-finding session. It becomes a development conversation where the person feels seen and supported. In security, this matters because the work can be emotionally heavy, especially when dealing with risk and urgency. When people feel supported, they are more willing to engage with complexity and to communicate early, which improves both performance and risk outcomes. A subtle but important part of running one-on-ones well is learning to manage your own impulses, especially the impulse to solve everything immediately. Leaders often want to be helpful by providing answers, but constant answering can slow growth because it trains people to wait for direction. A more strategic approach is to ask questions that help the person reach their own conclusions, while still stepping in when a decision must be made or when risk is high. For example, you might ask what options they see, what constraints exist, and what outcome they are optimizing for, then guide them toward a defensible choice. This builds their decision-making muscle, which is what grows leaders. It also makes the team more scalable, because you cannot personally solve every problem as responsibilities grow. One-on-ones are the perfect place to practice this balance between support and autonomy. When the person leaves with a clearer plan they help build, they feel ownership, and ownership drives follow-through. Over time, this reduces dependency and increases overall team capacity. As these conversations mature, you will notice that one-on-ones become a place where strategic culture is built, because culture is really the repeated patterns of behavior people believe are expected and safe. If your one-on-ones reward early truth, thoughtful reasoning, and business-aligned decisions, people will bring more of those behaviors into daily work. If your one-on-ones punish bad news, reward urgency theater, or focus only on superficial status, people will adapt by hiding reality and optimizing for appearance. Strategic security leadership depends on a culture where people speak clearly about risk, admit uncertainty, and collaborate on trade-offs. One-on-ones help create that culture because they are where people test whether it is safe to be honest and whether their development is valued. Over time, a team with strong one-on-one culture moves faster because it has fewer hidden conflicts, fewer surprises, and stronger trust between teammates. That speed is not reckless speed. It is the speed that comes from alignment and clarity. This is why one-on-ones matter to strategy, not as a soft skill, but as a mechanism that improves execution. To close, running one-on-ones that build trust, unblock work, and grow leaders is one of the most practical ways to improve security outcomes because it strengthens the human system that executes strategy. You build trust through consistency, steady tone, and a focus on thinking rather than surveillance-style reporting. You unblock work by surfacing hidden obstacles, separating control from dependency, and choosing small forward actions that restore momentum. You grow leaders by developing judgment, clarifying ownership, reinforcing business alignment, and using questions that build autonomy rather than dependence. You also use these conversations as early warning systems for emerging risks, because people's lived experiences reveal signals that formal reports often miss. When recognition and growth feedback are specific and grounded, one-on-ones become a development engine rather than a ritual. Over time, the team becomes more capable, more aligned, and more accountable, which makes strategic security work more defensible and more effective. That is why this skill belongs in the GSTRT mindset. It turns leadership intent into real behavior that protects business objectives.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit DailyCyber.News.